Right, shall we start the meeting? First item is apologies.
So, yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we've got 4 apologies that I've received. Councillor Spekovic, who has got a family commitment. Councillor Jane Ray, also a family commitment. Councillor Haynes as well. And Councillor Chitcher-Smiles has got training and some exams.
Are we happy to accept those apologies? Declarations of interest. Anyone like to declare any declarations of interest at this stage, please? No? Okay, start from the room. Mayor's report. I just had 2 things to say. So, many people don't realise that town councillors work largely voluntarily, hoping to contribute and do some good for our town. And we should note our thanks to the councillors who worked on the town council over the last year. So Councillor Brosnan, Burrows, Washington, and the late Brian Ellis. We should also give particular thanks to Brian, in my opinion, who is sadly no longer with us, as a long-standing member of the community, and continued to work even whilst undergoing his treatment for cancer. So councillors Wen, Drake and myself attended his funeral and paid our respects at St John's Church, and donations were taken for research into pancreatic cancer if anyone was interested in looking into that charity. Sorry, David, you were there as well. Sorry, Councillor Heritage. Sorry, I do apologise. Thank you. The second thing is, as you go about your daily lives and business in Harpenden, please keep your eyes and ears open for those that go above and beyond to improve the quality of our lives and go that extra mile for people who live, work or visit our town. So people can be recognised for their service, and we are all part of the process as we acknowledge them with an award in our annual meetings in May. So just keep an eye open, please. Okay, we've got a lot of minutes to get through, unless we have any urgent items that we need to deal with now or public questions.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So we do have an urgent item which I referred council to at the end of last week. So this urgent item relates to the limited waiting bays in the High Street. As I set out in my email, I've received a number of questions this week in relation to that particular matter, probably off the back of the minutes from one of the committee meetings being in the pack. Which have to be formally received by council within our governance arrangements. So where they're general questions that I've received, rather than reply to individual town councillors, Madam Mayor, I think it's important to take the opportunity this evening to have the urgent item so that all councillors hear the answers to general questions. I have gone back to individual specific answers where they are very specific of kind of nature. The minutes that you've got on the agenda are just for receiving, so we can't have a discussion on minutes. So that's why they're not an appropriate mechanism to have the conversation. So in order to cover that off, the town mayor and myself have agreed to have the urgent item this evening. It will cover off 2 key points. It will give a statement from myself on some of the work to date, but importantly, it will be an opportunity for council just to reconsider the next steps that it may wish to take on the particular matter. So the urgent item will be under exempt business, and it'll be taken right at the end of the last item on council. There is one further small update, and that's that, again, I put this in my email, Madam Mayor, to note that the agenda includes an item 9.3, which has actually been deferred, so I won't be considered this evening.
Were there any public questions?
None received.
And questions that have previously been submitted by members of the council, apart from those that you have just mentioned?
Yes, that's a separate mechanism,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, so there's no questions received.
Okay, lovely, thank you. All right, so let's go to the minutes that I've just mentioned then. So the first ones were the extraordinary meeting of the 20th of January. These that I'm going to list are pages 1 to 9 of your pack. Then the 27th of January, that was a meeting of council, and the annual town meeting of the 12th of May. So I have 3 sets there. I don't know everyone is happy, having read those, that they can approve those or receive them. I don't know what we're doing. Are we approving them? Receiving them. Approve them.
So, Madam Mayor, those ones as their council minutes, you're asked to confirm them.
Confirm them. Right. Okay. Get my jargon right by the end. Is everyone happy to confirm those, please?
So, so there's there was a typo on page 3. It's public questions. 7. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's great. Thank you. For detail. Did I see a raise of hands with that? Thank you.
I wasn't there at the
Sorry.
extraordinary council meeting, so can I confirm those minutes? I don't think I can. I think I'll abstain.
And we can take them all separately if that makes any difference. We just note the abstention just in relation to that set of minutes. Necessary?
Yes, Madam Mayor, so we wouldn't naturally note the voting of councillors unless there was a request for a recorded vote.
Fine. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. Item 7, minutes of committees and working parties on page 10 in the pack. So these are the working parties and committees that report to council. At 7.1, we have the Community Services Committee. We're asked to receive the minutes of the Community Services Committee that was held on the 22nd of January. It's in the same way many of us weren't there, and indeed the same as the 12th of March. Do we just receive those with a show of hands? Yeah, are we happy to receive those? Thank you. Okay, then the same in relation to the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee. The minutes from the 15th of January, the 5th of March. We've got 2 items that are specifically mentioned for us to consider, but they're later on in the agenda, 8.2 and 8.4. So we'll deal with those separately. Are we happy to receive the minutes of those 2 things? Thank you. Human Resources Committee met on the 9th of January and 25th of February 2025, and the minutes in our pack. Be happy to receive those minutes, Councillor Wright?
Apologies.
Thanks for coming.
Good excuse, I thought.
Yes. Are we happy to receive the minutes of the Human Resources Committee or the Working Party? No, it is committee. Thank you. And the Planning Committee, there are several dates here and they're all circulated in our pack. 28th of January, 18th of February, 11th of March, 1st of April, 22nd of April, 13th of May and the 3rd of June. Sorry, they're not in your pack, forgive me. These are circulated with our update and they're also online. Everyone happy to receive those? Thank you. Right, moving to item 8 then, which is officers' reports. We have a report at 8.1, which starts at page 31, which is the forward planner and the resolution factor. Do you want to say anything in relation to this?
Madam Mayor, very short. This is a standing item that council will recognise each time, so very happy to take any questions or comments on.
Right.
A brief administrative one. Why aren't there any items planned for the 23rd of March council meeting? It's going to be a very short meeting.
Well, Madam Mayor, so if it continues to be that way as the year progresses, then it won't be a meeting at all. However, it's very unusual. I'm sure as the year progresses, there'll be items added to it. Please don't remove it from the diaries just yet.
I look forward to it.
Okay. Any other observations then on the forward planner, because what we're asked to do in respect to that is to note and approve it, subject to any comments and amendments. Everyone happy to?
So just a minor typo on 26th of January 26. On page 33.
Yeah. Oh, 26, sorry, that should be a 6, not 5. Yeah, that is a good amendment, we'll do the next. Okay, that's noted, thank you. Any other comments or notes? Are we able to note and approve those then, please? Thank you. Okay, and the resolution tracker, we're asked to note the resolution tracker and approve the removal of those resolutions marked complete. So your tracker is on page 34, 35 and 36. Any comments? Okay, we're happy to approve of it. Sorry, hold on, let me get the jargon right. 1 second. To note them and approve the removal of the resolutions marked complete. Thank you. Right, moving on to accounts. So this starts at page 37 of your pack. Mr. Williams, did you want to say anything about that?
That's me, Madam Mayor. And a very short one, just to say that I'm very happy to take any questions. These are recommendations made through Corporate Policy and Finance Committee.
Did you want to say anything, Councillor Scott?
Yes, thank you. Just highlight a couple of points within the year-end account. So first of all, that we're able to, well, first of all, thank you to Daniel and the team for preparing them, very detailed and diligent as ever. 4 points I'd like to highlight to the council's attention. One is that we're able to hold the general reserves at approximately 597,000, which equates to approximately 4 months of spend. So that's considered to be sort of good practice in terms of supporting the finances of the council. Also pleased to observe we have maintained the high level sort of asset replacement plan for the next 10 years. We have a sort of a forward view about what the key assets of the town council and the potential liabilities that are coming up for maintenance and repair. Third item is just if you double click on that, there's a more detailed funding plan that goes through to the 2027 to 28 calendar years or financial year. So again, just more detail in terms of the upcoming financial obligations of the town council. Item 4 I'd just like to highlight is the results of the audit report, which once again commented that we received substantial assurance regarding the controls and the accounts of the town council, which is good to see. So, and just as a personal observation, I think the council is in a strong position to take on any additional responsibilities coming out of the forthcoming local government review. Thank you very much.
The question I had, and I'm sure will be answered very simply, I think, as a lay person or someone in the public gallery, as it were, at 4.2, that during the year an additional £906,360 is approved for release from reserves, which increased the net expenditure to 2.4. Is there a breakdown of that figure anywhere? An explanation as to where, why perhaps we spent more than we thought.
Yes, so Madam Mayor, Dan will pick up the breakdown figure because it's in one of the reports here. It might not be in this report, it might be in a later one.
Yes.
But it's not a case of spending more than we thought. These are reserves that we've released throughout the year to deliver whatever the reserve was built for. So it's not a case of thinking we were going to spend a certain amount and then overspending. It's quite the opposite. We've generated a surplus. So those are releases from reserve to deliver in the project that happen to be delivered during that period.
So if you look on page 43 and 44, there's the column for approved release of reserves on both the earmarked and the earmarked reserves and the use of receipts reserves.
Very helpful, thank you. Were there any other questions or comments? Councillor Ray?
I just have one. I did raise this point partly at the Public Policy and Finance Committee. If you look on page 50, down towards this, one of the things difficult to interpret in the data accounts is trends and movements year on year. So I have a number of examples which I've discussed with the finance officer. I'll take one classic one. You'll see that farmers markets had a profit in 23-24 of 12,11,982, and apparently in the last financial year a loss of 3,776. So I asked the completely unreasonable question as to why one had moved from one to the other. The answer is to this, as I understand it, is things have been recoded during the year. So maybe the way internal wages are allocated to that. I think that was the example which you gave down. What it does do, it makes it very difficult to understand the accounts from one year to the next. And if this is the formal statement of accounts, which I don't know where that these publish anywhere on the website, don't they? I mean, if I was, just a lay person asking, I would not really have a proper understanding of what the council was paying from one end to the other, and also why was the farmers market suddenly making a loss. It will be standard practice in commercial accounts where things are reclassified and changed to make a note to that effect. And any material items, generally you would then have a note in the accounts saying this is what the change is from year to year. That would be standard accounting practice in the commercial world. I know these accounts don't follow the standard accounting practice of the commercial world, but it does make it difficult to understand from one to the other. So I just wanted to first of all bring that to the attention of the council, because if you were looking at those accounts, they are difficult to understand, but also, as I said, the point of view of residents or anybody else looking at them. And I did wonder whether there was any mechanism for making the note equivalent to what you'd see in a set of standard commercial accounts to help explain those changes.
I make 2 points just before you answer that. And that is that I'm not 100% sure whether people, the general public or people that aren't accountants, would necessarily sit down and compare 1 year's accounts to the next accounts with any sort of real intention in order to analyse them in that way. I can appreciate from your perspective, because you're analysing them on your committee, that the notes might be helpful, but of course Mr. Williams was there to answer any questions that you had. And I wonder whether asking for notes to be made to explain so that we bring them in line with commercial accounts, which again, Joe Public, including myself, wouldn't necessarily be more familiar with than council accounts.
Sorry, I don't make myself clear on this. I don't think we should alter the format of these accounts or what's published in these accounts because they are consistent, presumably, with whatever other public sector organisation is doing. So I wasn't suggesting, it was more that maybe we as a council had access to understand what was going on there. I completely agree. I wouldn't start adding additional notes to the public website on this.
Okay.
That would cause an additional. But in case anybody did ask, at least the answer would be there. But I agree. No, I mean, this is obviously, I presume, the standard format which is applied to every other town, parish, council. And I wouldn't want to suggest getting away from that. I think that would have more complications than it was worth, quite frankly.
So if you had any questions, did Mr. Williams answer them as you went through them?
He gave me an idea it was due to recoding,
Yeah.
but without the specifics.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem right in that to cluster up a meeting asking him to go through debits and credits.
Yeah.
I'm happy to pick up the issue individually with him because, as you say, I suspect that the number of people who would be remotely interested in debits and credits is very few on number.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just to say, to make a point, I think the response that I saw did give quite a specific answer to the recoding. It's not just a general recoding exercise. The 4 key headings that were referred to were all related to the Town Ranger service coming in-house. So if you see at the time of the business case being considered for that, the finance sections of that would flag where there are going to be future changes. So if you take the farmers market big change was that we actually, rather than owning our own stalls, we entered into a hire and rental agreement, which across the town ranger service helped to save money, but under the farmers market line meant now that we were hiring stalls every month. So that was a cost we didn't have before. So we rarely do recoding for the sake of it. It's linked to business cases, and the town ranger service is the major one within here. So if you track back to the business case for that, all the changes should be referenced. So when you go through
I do remember that
a
actually.
full
yeah.
cycle of it,
Yeah.
you should be able to see it. But we're always happy to take questions as well and provide clarity.
I think on that point, yeah, I know, I'm not suggesting you're doing this on a random basis, that certainly wouldn't be the
No,
suggestion.
well, I don't think we took that, no.
That line. So it was just that, you know, I mean, if these things are being published publicly, then sometimes, you know, you need to be ready in case someone asks the obvious.
Oh, that's for council. My interpretation of they're horrendous. But actually trying to work anything out what's actually happened.
So in terms of what you would like then, are you just asking Mr Williams to be ready to answer questions that either come from councillors or the public in relation to the comparison between 23-24 and now and going forward?
Partly that, yes. The other thing I thought from the council was, sorry, I don't want to hog this meeting. From the council's point of view is when we come to considering next year's budget, for example, one of the things again you would do on a commercial basis is compare things year on year. Just to see how it's moving, and that makes it a bit more difficult for councillors to understand, you know, how the budget is moving. Again, I don't want to take up time in meetings like this on the detail, and I'm happy for myself, obviously, other councillors to pick up the issues directly with you.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think the only thing to add that the 30-day period that the accounts are open for the public, like official governance kind of, that will start in a couple of days' time. So if it puts your mind at ease at all, any of the members of the public that do decide to read them, they can come and ask me any questions they like.
I will be surprised.
Yeah, no, it's great that you're there. Thank you. All right. Any other questions or observations? Has everyone had an opportunity to look at them? So if that's the case, then what we're asked to do is note the outturn for 2024-25 as set out in section 4. That was where my question arose from, actually. So is everyone happy to note the outturn? Then we're asked to approve the level of earmarked reserves and general reserves at the 31st of March 2025 as set out in 5.8. Everyone had a chance to look at that? I'm happy to approve the level of earmarked reserves in that way. Okay. We're asked to approve the release of the reserves as set out in section 5. I'm happy to do that. Approve the statement of accounts for the financial year 24-25. They're at page 45. Starting page 45. Everyone happy to do that? Thank you. And approve that the statement of accounts be signed by the mayor and the responsible financial officer.
Yeah, I'd like to do that at the end.
Yeah, absolutely fine. Right. All good? Right, let's move on. So we have an internal audit report at page 63. Recommendation here is for councillors asked to review and approve the internal audit report for 24-25. Anything you need to say about that?
No, Madam Mayor, just again, it's a recommendation through from CPF.
Anything to add, councillor Scott?
No, other than it seems like a detailed report. There's no major items, I think, for the second year running significant assurance. So thank you again. Just keep it going. So again next year, please.
Okay, so can we approve that then, having reviewed it? Thank you. Moving on to the risk assessment strategy then, page 74. Here we are asked to approve the risk assessment strategy and risk register following the recommendation made by CPF committee that is set out at 3.3, and that refers to an appendix A, and basically saying the risk register is slightly signed and is available on the website. That's a helpful link. Appendix B. So we've all read that in its entirety, and made notes. We're happy to approve that unless the chair has got any comments to make about that.
Not on this item, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Happy to approve it? Yeah, thank you. Page 87 then now for the annual governance statement. We're asked to approve section 1 of the annual governance and accountability return, setting out the annual governance statement 24-25 as detailed in paragraph 4 of the report. Is there anything you wanted to add to section 1? Nothing to add? Any questions arising from that? That's section 1, specifically detailed in paragraph 4. No comments, questions, notes, typos, nothing, then can we approve that, please? Okay, thank you. Page 91 is our annual governance and accountability return for 24-25. The council is asked to approve section 2 of the annual governance and accountability return 24-25, setting out the accounting statement for the financial year ending 31st of March 25, and approve the annual statements 24-25 to be signed by myself and the responsible financial officer and submitted for audit, and to note the annual internal audit report 24-25, that section has been completed. Should we take those internal, or should we just do a big lot? Any comments on any of that? This is section 2 now. No, any comments? Are we happy to take those as 3 items in what? Oh yes, councillor Heritage. Oh, you're voting. We're jumping the gun, right? Okay. Yep. Everyone ready to go? Right, Brill. Thank you, everyone. Okay, business plan. To page 100. This is a business plan update. My favourite bit. And we're asked to note the high-level updates against the business plan set out in Appendix A. Has everyone had an opportunity to have a look at that? It's a colour-coded document which sets out our business plan and an update or two. Anyone have any comments on that? Excited about that. I can't believe this is going to be. Shall I update everyone on the plot, or do you want to do that? So the Community Services Committee decided that we would approve a licence for the park run, and they will be on a trial period for 12 months. It will be under review every quarter. There are fairly obvious difficulties that they've acknowledged and are trying to work with. Yeah, so that's for a period of 12 months starting in the spring of next year. So that will be another mayor cutting the ribbon to start that off. I think that's the only update I have. Any other comments then, or notes, or?
Yeah, just a point I would make is that I think the street park looks great. That's amazing how well that's going to go.
It's a good self, wasn't it?
It should be. complimented on that.
Any other glimmers of excitement?
Matt, I'm just curious to see or to understand the footfall numbers for the banking hub and to see if that is meeting expectations.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so I haven't got the stats handy, but we'll send around the latest stats. So from my perspective, the banking hub, the interim banking hub, is kind of steady numbers really. I think the important thing is all the residents it is serving are individuals that would have either not had face-to-face banking opportunities or would have had to go to St Albans or further afield. So we'll share around the actual numbers, but it's kind of steady. There's loads more capacity, don't get me wrong. And I think once we reach the point of having a high street permanent hub, then I think it'd be an incredibly busy community facility that we will hopefully look to do much more than just banking services in if we've got the space. You know, the whole town council work around supporting local businesses in the right building, perhaps we might be able to do some added value in around that. The real good news is the postmaster team that we've got downstairs now are, I understand, the ones that will run the permanent up when that is up and running. So that's a nice bit of continuity for the initiative. There are negotiations going on at the moment around two potential permanent locations and the negotiations with landlords.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so going back to then what we're asked to do, we're asked to note the high level updates of the business plan. Everyone happy to do that? Thank you. We need sleeping bags tonight, but looks like you're going to do very well, isn't it? So turning to the next item then is the local council award, starting at page 125. I'm going for gold. We are asked to approve an application for the local council award scheme, an application for the gold award. To confirm the documents, information and conditions are in place for the Gold Award and that they are published on the council website where applicable. And that's wording that's just lifted from their criteria, isn't it? And then note that some of the documents will be subject to their periodic reviews throughout 2025. And note that officers will develop the relevant evidence base for the application, which will demonstrate excellence. Does anyone have any questions for our town clerk on that application? I think Councillor Drake just pitched.
They'd have to find that idea to me. Do you think that it will help and assist when we come to talking about local government devolution if we have an award like that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so there is a slight tactical thing at play here, and that is that in regards to local government reorganisation, we don't quite know what the government's position is going to be in terms of town and parish councils, or indeed community councils, as they may end up being referred to. And so in the scenario that, so governments often like to bring things in phases. So we want to avoid the scenario where anything that happens to our sector might be based on those that might have a certain quality standard. And so part of the opportunity here and the tactic is to try to secure this ahead of that potentially happen. It is also a useful, good thing for the town council to have. We have explored it in the past, but in the past, the weight of work required in order to secure it wasn't felt to be of value. But because of that tactical point, we don't want to miss out for the sake of having to go through the process.
Sense.
Would I be right in saying, I mean, I haven't read it in very, very fine detail, but having looked at the criteria, a lot of what's in here we do anyway. So it didn't seem to me that we were putting a huge burden on your shoulders in order to get this all up and running, because a lot of what they're asking for is just our way of life here, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Madam Mayor. So we do all of this anyway. I think the work is probably in the fourth recommendation, which is you have to present it in a certain way.
Right.
And for the bronze level, Madam Mayor, you can simply add links to show that you've got something. But as you move up to the gold, you have to provide lots of narrative as to, you know, you've got a policy, here's examples of what it means in practice, and here's evidence to show that our community engagement strategy is put into practice and isn't just something that is on our website. So that's where the work is really, in creating the relevant evidence base to demonstrate our excellence, not our words, that's words directly lifted from the award itself.
Okay.
It's a slight question, just how many what percentage of councils have it? Is it a rare thing or super rare thing?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we've probably got those stats on now, so we'll look them and send them around the bulletin for interest. It will be a very small percentage, I would have thought, Madam Mayor.
I did have a look online, and I think only Ware in Hertfordshire as a gold standard.
Real curious to get.
Councillor Wen, sorry, you had a question, didn't you?
My question's kind of been answered. It was how close are we to having Phil completed? And you answered that really. So.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, and just to add, we're slightly deadline driven on this one because we have to submit by a particular date in September. Otherwise, we lose this year's cycle of opportunities.
Yeah.
And given so much unknown about LGR, local government reorganisation, we're doing a lot of work. CPF and CSC have approved policy updates recently that have contributed to this as well. So probably a busy piece of work over the summer.
Do you need anything to get that done? Anything extra, or is it all covered in current staffing levels and resources?
Yeah, it's all covered in that sense, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think the final piece of the jigsaw is likely to be HR committee next month, where there are a couple of HR related policies that are coming forward in our periodic review that will complete the jigsaw on the policy side. And then
I also noted as well at page 144, the panel may ask for further information or talk with councillors and staff. So I think the councillors also have to be on board with it and not just assume that it's the officers that are going to take up all the slack. So if anyone comes to us, we should be as helpful as we can, I think.
yeah, Madam Mayor. So I think in that scenario, I think they asked for councillors to be put forward in that sense. So if it does come to that, then we'd be heavily briefed.
Okay, I feel like the offset inspection where you have a practice class before you have the offset inspection.
Maybe a bit more of us.
Well, that's sprints, right? Okay. Lovely. Right. So, are we going to take a vote on that then? So, we're asked at 2.1.1 to approve the application. 2.1.2 to confirm that the documents will be in place. 2.1.3 note that the documents will be subject to reviews, and 2.1.4 that officers will develop the relevant evidence. We're happy to take all those as a lump. Okay, we're all happy to go ahead. Great, thank you. Right, draft sports plan at page 152. Oh, sorry, we've got that's. So, verbal presentation, sorry, before we go on to the next item. Would you like to help us with that, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So 8.9 is the local government reorganisation. Verbal presentation, there's nothing to look at, I'm afraid, other than me, because this is a short update to give verbally. This will likely, Madam Mayor, end up being a bit of a standing item, I would have thought, on council. It's not built into the forward plan at the moment. However, I would expect, the March meeting that's currently blank to have something on local government reorganisation looking at the forward timeline. So I thought it would be useful to give a very high level update from my perspective in terms of what I'm hearing. I'm aware that actually you may well have seen some stuff in the media yourselves. Some of you at district council may have more updates on certain things than I do. So, but useful nonetheless to give a short update, I think, and to pick on a couple of bits just to kind of give a take on my take on them. So we're not directly involved in developing the proposals in Hertfordshire, but we are kind of working and watching them rather closely, with an aim to really try to maximise the opportunity for Harpenden and for the town council. We've got a local government reorganisation working party, which is probably going to have some busy work in the months ahead. And we'll be arranging those meetings very soon. And that working party is going to be looking at some of the details of the opportunities as that develops. So the key opportunity, we hope, that we've always referred to as a greater role and ownership in what I define as the hyperlocal assets and services, the things that are of most day-to-day importance to residents in somewhere like Harpenden, and probably the sorts of things that once the unitary authorities are set up and the combined authorities, the hyperlocal are the things that are in danger of being not necessarily forgotten about, but an afterthought in some ways. And so myself, along with colleagues in our sector, meet monthly to develop ideas and plans to see how we can do more with the hyperlocal if the door is open to us, which is really, really crucial. And that door maybe needs to be opened by our partners locally in district county council, or potentially through the government as well. That might open the door for us. So really the scale of the opportunity as I see it for the town council depends largely on the number of unitaries that are created, and a willingness to deliver a different way on the hyperlocal sort of assets and services. So we know that the county and districts locally have ruled out a one unitary model. I understand, I haven't seen this in writing anywhere, but I understand the two unitary model may also not be favourable, and so it may be looking at a 3 or 4 unitary model. Generally, the more unitaries you would have, the less opportunity you would probably see for town and parishes to do more, in my view, and having looked at it elsewhere. So again, my view is that the more unitaries will be lesser in the transformational scale of doing hyperlocal different. So it might be a harder push and a harder sell for the town council. The county and district and boroughs submitted an interim plan through to government back in March, and they have to submit a final version in late November. And that basically sets the one way forward that government want to be put forward, because government don't want to decide. They want local areas to decide. Whether in Hertfordshire we get to the place of having an agreed way forward across all the districts and county is probably more likely off the back of the recent local elections. But still there are some challenges in some parts where sort of there'll be different views, should we say. The government did give a response to the interim plan, and I think we've probably shared that in the bulletin. If we haven't, we'll do that again. And there were some useful references again to town and parish councils within there, because the interim plan from Hertfordshire referenced town and parish councils. So the government continues to use language where they really recognise the value of parish councils and the role we play in local communities. And want to see a continuation of the work that we do. But they're making it clear in all of their responses that isn't a replacement for good local engagement by whatever authorities come out of LGR. And that's quite a key thing. And the government keep referring to this line around hardwiring local community engagement into these new structures, and preferably, as they say, through area or neighbourhood area committees. And I'll come back to that in a minute. They also said that where there are plans to create new town and parishes, there shouldn't basically be a blanket approach. Then it needs to be carefully considered, which I think is a very important and relevant message in this area, in this district, given the unparished area of St Albans. A personal view, I think it's really important that the district get on with parishing that area, otherwise it could be left behind throughout all of this. But the government are clear that shouldn't be the default mode to just parish where there are unparished areas, and I think that's quite interesting. And they've made a big push, amongst other things, in the response around needing further information from the county and districts on neighbourhood-based governance, and in particular this role of neighbourhood area committees. Now, forgive me if you're aware or have you heard of area committees before. Forgive me, I'll just kind of give a couple of points on them for a couple of reasons, really. One, because they're quite dated, but they're a very dated model of local governance, and in many cases they don't work. However, the good news is there are lots of good examples around the country of where they do and can have good things going on. So where area committees work well, in my view, and looking at different research is that where they are used to identify some of the main priorities within that unitary area, and they genuinely delegate the ability for those neighbourhood area committees to influence and shape the future of those key priorities. And that's priorities in relation to the unitary responsibilities. So, you know, obviously the big things like adult social care, education, highways. So area-based committees having, you know, a say on how those are run in those areas. Where they are really successful, they bring together a real range of local partners. So they aren't just necessarily public sector. They may bring together the voluntary and community sector. They might sit on these area boards. And where they're very successful, you won't be surprised to hear me say that the town councils are at the heart of them as well. So I think that this concept that's going to have to be developed provides the town council with an opportunity. And as plans become clearer as to what the thinking is, there could be an opportunity, I think, to deliver the sort of clustering model that we've spoken about here before, where there's two types of opportunities for us. There's the opportunity for the town council to take on more assets and services, and I kind of mentioned that at the start, that we don't know how far the door's going to open on that. But the other one is how can we still influence the services that sit at the unitary level. And so, for example, we could host a neighbourhood area committee for Harpenden and a surrounding cluster that could bring together the likes of Redbourne and Winhampstead. And to help make it a success, it could be something that the town council offers to administer, as an example, so that we give it the drive that it needs. So as we hear more about what the local response is going to be to that letter on area committees, I think that's something that the working party will have to look at really closely. So what next? We're watching this really closely as a town council and in my role here. I'm involved in lots of other work across the county and regionally and elsewhere as well to try to maximise the opportunity for places like this. We need to watch carefully how the district plan to deal with the unparished area issue, which, as I say, is a very important thing. I think they need to get on and do it. But importantly, I think we should seek parity of opportunity with that. So, for example, if that area becomes parished and the district decides to transfer all types of assets and services, some of which we may not have ourselves, I think that opportunity should be district-wide. It shouldn't just be for certain parts of the district itself. Of course, there'll be many things that I would imagine are transferred that we already have kind of been on that journey, so green spaces and things like that. I think we need to continue to contribute to LGR, and our working party gives us a mechanism to do that. And I think part of that key work is to identify what assets there are within our town boundary that are currently owned by other parts of the public sector, to develop further our kind of wish list of what we may want to take on. And that's probably the next step of types of things. That's not necessarily the parks and green spaces, because we've done most of them, but it's other assets, buildings, some of which are on long leases to at peppercorn rates to community organisations that we would not necessarily want to move on with the leases, but actually in the world of the unitary becoming the landlord that might be remote somewhere else in the county. That's quite a worry that all of a sudden the scout huts, the bowls clubs and all those that are actually owned by the district actually are kind of further afield and become further down the pecking order. So I think we need to watch that bit carefully, have a look at the assets. I have got an asset list. We'll be working over that in the summer. And that's probably enough for my verbal update this evening. Happy to take questions.
Really helpful. Does anyone have any questions?
I suppose two thoughts for the questions I had. So one was, so obviously you're doing a fine job with lots of things. Is there other things that we should be thinking about even beyond the town council, just the local community as a whole, of where we should be trying to influence the process to make sure we're putting our best foot forward? So it's coming from multiple directions. The other one, the second question was going back to your assets and talking about scout huts and things. I guess one of the big concerns with that is there are profitable assets and there are loss-making assets. And we might need to think about how we combine those. Because we don't want to just end up picking up all the loss-making ones with a big cost to us. But equally, I can see the loss-making ones sitting there with nobody wanting to take them up, and then it will become a decision of what does that mean, and does that asset disappear, which could be quite significant for the community, etc. So where the profitability or otherwise of those assets goes probably makes quite a difference to, particularly at county level, unitary authority level, as to whether they want to keep it or take it apart.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, I mean, on that second part, the packaging of it all is really, really important. And, you know, ideally, if the door was fully open and it was a sort of proactive, collaborative discussion across the county with our sector, then you would try to get that package. I think the bare minimum will probably be those community assets that probably are less commercial. So as it comes down the line, that may be the only opportunity that is directly there for us. So that may be the decision down the line. But even in that scenario, I would say, Madam Mayor, there are lots of those assets that are, and there are lots of those assets that are kind of full repair and maintenance for the leaseholder.
Yep.
And in reality, these are small community groups that aren't ever going to be able to put the sort of the TLC into them. So, you know, if you think about an item later on, the sports facility strategy, one of our key powers, I think, is being that kind of convener and enabler. So sit in the middle, pulling people together. And, you know, whilst I can't talk about it in the public session, there is one community building where one of our partners would love to get hold of it to turn it into an incredible community hub. And if that could come over to the town council to help enable that, that would be, you know, incredible. Whereas at the moment, that's probably not going to go anywhere. So there are ways that we can bring in funding and opportunities as an enabler.
Should we be looking to use our convening powers to the extent we have them to involve the Harpenden district councillors, county councillors, dare I say it, MP as well, in that all of these sort of influencing where that might be, making sure we're putting our best foot forward at all the different levels to get what we want.
Well, the working party has a mixture of different councillors on. Obviously, you don't want to put people in difficult positions and make them breach confidences and things. That wouldn't be appropriate. But our MP, I would say, was on board with a lot of the discussion that we were having this week about the restructuring and certainly the objectives that we put forward at that meeting. There was a very positive response. And I think because of the pragmatic approach that we have and what we're trying to achieve, which is basically just saving and developing community assets and enabling things to improve, because we have the resources and the abilities to be able to improve those things, I think the MP would definitely be on board. And so she's happy to have quarterly meetings to talk about where that might be going. And so that was actually one of her to-do lists, wasn't it, to have a look at what's happening, what the discussions are going on in Parliament about that.
And so, Madam Mayor, just to add a point, actually, because Councillor Ray made the distinction between kind of community assets and commercial assets. And what we have seen in some areas outside of Hertfordshire, of course, that's gone through this, is that in some ways, when these real local assets go off to a unitary, the community asset quite quickly become a commercial asset. And, you know, you see a nice infield of a small development of, you know, X number of houses, or a particular garage site is developed in a way, you know. So that's the other thing that we should be, that I'm kind of mindful of looking elsewhere, that, you know, once you have something that potentially an asset that goes to another body, it could actually.
And I think we have to recognise that as you go to a unitary authority, we look like one of the better off areas within that unitary authority, even more starkly than perhaps it does now, which means it's even more difficult for us to get those funds from the central point. It's just maybe more in our own boat.
I think so. It's a melting pot, isn't it?
I have a question. In terms of the unitary combined authorities, what are the principles behind the design of those organisations? So I'm using business language here, but have they have a view on like core competence or the core mission, the purpose? Because that surely then defines, well, these are assets and services that we want to keep and invest in and build. and these are assets that are not core to our mission and our purpose. I'm just curious what sort of, beyond sort of asset grabs and profit and loss and cash flow, what are the principles behind the design of these, substantial new organisations?
Good question.
I mean, so I can only, I was going to say I can only talk on behalf of the government, but actually I'm not going to try and do that. So I can only refer to what the government talk about it. So their key driver for it is to simplify local government and remove tiers of bureaucracy in lots of ways, and put but also put local councillors at the heart of decision making again. So they keep challenging this idea of backbench councillors. Actually, their view is that all local councillors should be influencing all important local decisions. So broadly, it's around removing layers, complications, but also the financial element of that. So the white paper talks a lot around the savings that could be generated in order to take some of the pressures away, and some of the complications in, say, master planning, big areas. So, if you take an area like this, in theory, the idea is that if you didn't have however many districts and counties, and you didn't have to have that many local plans, that unitary could look at something a bit more holistically, and things wouldn't be slowed down as much. So there's that sort of language, so bureaucracy, saving, simplifying it, engaging the community more. But of course, as things develop, these things all have to work financially. So there was one option in the interim plan put forward that I understand actually would cost more than the current setup. So the challenge is once it comes to agreeing what this looks like and how councils get there, there's varying kind of ways in which they'll do that. But the worry is once they get there, they'll only be able to do those things that are local, regional, and that's my point about the hyperlocal. The hyperlocal doesn't become to the top of the list all of a sudden. Actually, there's even more pressures, and so the worry is it gets left behind.
Sorry, just thinking about that actually. 2P, does 2P apply in local authorities in this way as well?
Yeah, 2P does apply. So very much so. So depending on all the services and what have you, it's incredibly complicated.
Yeah, and at some point in time, that's clearly something which you'll need some advice around, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, so anything that we look to take on in the future will go through a normal business case setting, in the same way the Town Ranger Service did. So we set out the business case for it. We look at how we all the implications, and then build a plan.
Sorry, just so there's we, if you like, we say we want bits from other bits, but presumably there's also a position where people can effectively place bits with us we don't have a veto over saying no to pieces. Is that correct? As envisaged.
So Madam Mayor, I mean, at the moment, that more radical approach isn't being suggested. If you're asking me personally, I think that would be fantastic. Because my view is that there's certain hyperlocal things that should be at our level. And so in many ways, it'd be great to get that direction from a government level to say, all of these types of things need to be delivered by this type of council. I think that would be a kind of a good thing. I don't think we'll quite get to that. I think we may get towards that if the financial business case around these things becomes tighter and tighter down the line. And when, the parties that are developing proposals, that sort of councils as parties start to think, hang on a minute, how are we going to do some of this?
So do you think there will be a bit of, I don't want to use the word really, but I can't think of a better one, horse trading? Well, we'll take on this if you give us that, and will there be sort of a jigsaw of assets and things?
Yeah, I think, Madam Mayor, when it's worked well elsewhere, from what I see and talking to my colleagues, that's been a key part of it, actually, with a focus on what's best for the local community, and not what's best for other types of organisations. And of course, in a town like Hartland, we're very close to the community in lots of ways, and well engaged. I mean, it does give challenges elsewhere, like St Albans City Centre, like Stevenage, and like other places that don't actually have a town and parish council. So it's a bit more difficult to get to a position as to where we are.
Probably makes it quite interesting as to how we determine as what the criteria are deciding whether that's something we should take on or not. for many different things. Is it a good thing to take on, or is it an affordable thing to take on, or there's both the financial and the community element
That's
to
where
it.
your list of assets is going
Yeah.
to come in, isn't it? And
And there may be some harsh choices in that at some point as well.
Yeah, I think so, Madam Mayor. I think most of the discussion naturally goes towards assets and physical things, where actually the real transformation is in the service side of things.
yeah,
And that's where a lot of our colleagues elsewhere that are doing, good things, are well engaged in the service side. Well,
okay. So, what sort of examples of services are you thinking about?
well, it's the things that have been in my presentations before. So there's elements of licensing, there's elements of minor highways, those types of services. There's elements of planning type services, street trading, there's all sorts of things that colleagues elsewhere have various forms of either direct ownership of or have delegated decision-making powers.
Yeah,
The idea being is that what a lot of places wish to avoid is having a blanket one-size-fits-all approach across a massive geographical area, so that the policy to street trading is the same in Stevenage and Londonderry and Redbourne. You kind of want to avoid that sort of thing because they're very different places, but you run the risk of that not being bespoke when it moves sort of to a wider geography. Just looking at examples elsewhere.
yeah. Any other questions about that? Or any comments for Carl at this point? So have you an idea when the working party will have its first
I think we're working on that.
working? Okay,
Yes.
work in progress, right, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to hijack Councillor Ray's diary, I think, afterwards, and we'll get some dates sorted. We haven't started to try to get some yet, but we'll get those sorted. Book a series of them.
You don't need us to do anything about that, just say thank you very much for the time that you've spent looking into it again. Thank you. Okay, am I allowed to move on to sports plan now?
Go for it.
All right, so this is a page 152, our draft sports plan. Sorry, I've abbreviated that. It's the draft sports facility / club action plan. And here we're asked to note the contents of the report and agree the action plan in order to enable officers to begin the next stage of the. So the action plan itself isn't page numbered, but you'll see it after the recommendation. Oops, David. Sorry, Dan, have you got that detail that you had before? Thank you. So we've got Appendix A. Sorry, I'll do it. Thank you. And it runs to, from reference number 1 all the way through to 17. And then you've got some additional information about the clubs that are mentioned specifically in the report. So did anyone have any questions about that, or anything that you wanted to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just the only thing really to add is that this is a key priority in our business plan, and you'll know that much of our focus so far in terms of sports facilities have been our own ones, and we've made significant improvements in the last couple of years, whilst also taking the opportunity to improve sort of others' facilities as well where we can add value. But the action plan really aims to try to have a real focus on what our priorities are going to be in terms of our role improving sport facilities in the next 12 months. You'll see we've broken it down into a kind of two-phased approach. That's partly because we can't do everything all at once. But secondly, we know that there are a real priority set of actions that we want to get on and start trying to sort out. In the summer, we're going to be sort of initiating phase 2, is engaging with a wider range of sports clubs to understand their aspirations, their challenges. And then so we will bring back in the future we're referring to this as a draft plan. The next time we see this will be the final one with phase 2 stuff in it as well.
Okay. Scott.
One question, Madam Mayor. I suppose this is probably no longer a potential interest, but my sons were members of Harpenden Colts. They've now finished the seasons. They're no longer active players, although they have played in the past. Harpenden and Colts is missing from the list, although there's Harpenden Rugby Club, the Cricket Club, others. I'm just curious to see why Harpenden and Colts are not on the list.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So whilst they're not specifically mentioned, the work around 6.1, which is around the town football club, that clubhouse facility is very explicitly linked to the Colts, as is the 3G pitch. So 9.1, 9.2, you know, the work to continue to make sure that that is of a high standard is really, really important. And the aim in 9.2 to secure additional funding for future 3G pitches has the ability to kind of help the Colts hugely. We probably also recognise that actually one of our key priorities in delivering the 3G pitch has enabled the Colts to significantly increase in size, although they were huge already, and meet many of their aspirations. So in lots of ways, we've done lots of work there, remain a key partner. We have a grass pitch improvement plan, which we deliver in partnership with them. So I think whilst they're not specifically mentioned here in them, a lot of these actions will be a benefit to them.
Yeah.
So if I may respond to that, so thank you. That was a very helpful update, and I think it makes sense. Just an administrative request, if there's a way to mention that within here, and I think Madam Mayor, the town clerk's responses were all very satisfactory. But just from a presentational point of view, I'm just wondering whether we could find space to mention the benefit that the Colts have received from that. And I'd like to make particular reference to the growth in girls football, which has been a huge success story for Colts, and I don't think would have been possible to the extent it has been without the 3G pitch. So I think it's a fantastic asset. We've quite rightly made a great contribution to that, and just presentationally, if we can note it in a sentence or two, I think that would be very good.
To do so. Did they actually respond to, because this information comes from sort of questionnaires or surveys that you sent out? Did the Colts actually respond?
No, so they weren't one of our focus in the start, because we're already well engaged. We've already got a three-way partnership with them that's got a vision for the future. It's partly linked to the pavilion item a bit later on. Actually, that's a key part of this as well.
So you're happy to just add them at some point for our next report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I think that's probably the best way. Yeah.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Scott?
That's fine. I think I think the work that's been done is terrific. We fully support it. Just even an administrative note in the updated notes for this section to mention the work that's been done, and then to continue to reference the Colts in the future reports would be my request, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Squash. I'm a member of the Harpenden Squash Club, affiliated to the rugby club. I'm a non-playing member at the moment due to injury. So I know a little bit about it, and from October this year, the Harpenden Squash Club will no longer have a venue. I note here that there's going to be support to the club with their future facility, which I understand is going to be built in Redbourne. I'd like to ask what support can be given to that.
Do you know anything about that?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So that particular facility is out of our patch, and the Squash Club do have plans to move there. Although, be it, I understand that facility hasn't necessarily even got planning permission as yet, so there's a bit of a time lag.
It does, I believe, it does have planning permission. First stage, anyway.
Yeah, Chair. So I think we're on a slightly grey area in terms of presenting business here, because in order to partly answer the question as robustly as possible, I'm happy to do that when you move into exempt business at the start, just to give a kind of an update.
Mind if we can mark that?
Because
Yes, okay.
it's complicated. It comes under that side.
Councillor Drake?
Obviously, this is a great idea, and the plan is really very comprehensive. In terms of the cost, you've got a lot of no cost officer time only, but officer time is a cost. And I was concerned about how much officer time is actually going to be taken up in delivering this plan, and if you're happy that you have the capacity in your current officer team to deliver.
Did you want to answer? I imagine the first one is it depends which item it is and what we're going to do on it as to how much opposite time. And then have you got capacity? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So I think a part of the answer, if I was, this is actually a question that probably got asked this time last year, and my answer would have been then, we're an incredibly lean staff team and we really need some more capacity. And we are in many ways, but also usefully, the HR committee and council approved additional capacity earlier this year, which we've now implemented, and a restructure. So as a result of that, we've got a very heavily focused community services team now, and a new community services manager, Madeleine Clark, who's referenced here. So actually, we've already brought in capacity that enables us to go and deliver a lot of this. Because the ones that don't cost us any hard cash, it is about having the people to do it. And the fact that we've done the restructure, we've kind of realigned ourselves to enable us to do that. Otherwise, it would have largely been me, and my answer probably would have been, we'll do it, but I'm not quite sure how. So we've got capacity.
We're looking to mention on this. So I think it's really good to see the Harpenden Rovers youth piece, because obviously that's an area of town which has got less facilities than elsewhere. I think it's really positive to help out. My guess is, reading things, that there's actually quite a lot of work required on that pitch and that clubhouse as well. And it might be worth that pavilion that they've got there. I wonder whether it's actually, when you get into it, suitable. Some of the same problems as the pavilions up in Rothamsted. But it may be worth remembering that when we look at other pavilions and think about it, and the principle of spreading these things around parts of Harpenden.
This is a piece that we looked at in the CSC meeting this week. We were sent photographs of that pavilion, and it does not look a very happy building at all.
I would be surprised if it's a case of taking it over and making use of it.
Yeah, so there were some discussions about how that area was to be allocated for their use, put it in that way without overstepping. So the pitches have already been mown and are actually looking a lot more like football pitches than they were even this time last week. The pavilion, I think, will need a bit more than TLC, put it that way.
I think it's a huge thing to encourage the club, because speaking as having two boys who never managed to get into Colts on the waiting list is something there's obviously massive demand for in Harpenden. So having somebody else get up to speed is really good. And the fact it's that end of town, I also think is really helpful.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I mean, just to build on what you said there, so CSC looked at this week and agreed to enter into a new licence with Harpenden Rovers Youth for the grass pitches. It's worth noting the town council doesn't own the pavilion building. It's owned by an entity that we don't think is an entity anymore, called Harpenden Rovers, separate to the youth. So there's a bit of legal work going on at the moment that's approved by CSC to kind of unlock this new partnership with Rovers Youth, which you kind of referred to in here. So this is a really good example of us being an enabler, being willing to challenge how our facilities are used to make sure they're used more robustly, but also to help draw down funding from the likes of the Football Foundation. So we'll be supporting a bid for grass pitch improvements, and also negotiations, discussions with Hearts FA around some capital funding to help make improvements to the building. Now, that might not necessarily come to us, but we're going to be a key party to help make that happen.
They've, as well as giving it mowing it and everything, they've got two massive things of sand up there. I assume that's to fill in the potholes or something. But yeah, I don't know.
My dog would be very disappointed. He used to like ponds in the middle of the pitches.
Yeah, well, it's all, they've just got this huge thing of sand in the middle of the pitches up there now. I don't know what that's for, but
He also likes chasing the rats out of the pavilion.
yeah. I didn't notice any rats. I just noticed the big sand. So having said, I thought it'd had a haircut. It is being mown and it has got the sand. I don't know what the sand's for.
Yeah, if a photograph could smell, that was one. I mean,
It's really good that they're going to do something with it.
yeah. Right. Any other questions then before we go back to our recommendation?
All right, just one more. You've got a list. Did you mention earlier that this is not an exhaustive list of of sport for activities. I was thinking swimming in particular, it's a massive participation sport. Anything
Or
that
something there either.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, so this list here is the phase one, so it's the ones that they're not actually necessarily quick wins, but they're things that we're well engaged with already. Phase two is, well, we'll widen the range of sports clubs. In many of those, we, like your example there, we probably don't know much about in terms of what their aspirations are.
Yeah.
And the first stage will be to try to understand what they are. The second phase of that is to go, are we able to do something about that? Because we, quite often we might get told half a dozen things of what the key challenges are, but actually we have to really select the two or three that we can make a big difference, and we focus on them. So the likes of swimming, really good example of the engagement we'll do. Netball's another one. Actually, if this was a list of sports that we'd already engaged with, netball is one of them, where we introduced the markings on the tennis courts, which has brought them into netball use. So there's loads of other clubs that we're going to engage with over the summer, so that will sort of feed the phase two.
Thank you.
Anything else? Shall we look then to note the contents of this report and thank Madeline and agree the action plan in order to enable officers to be in the next stage of delivery? Okay. Thank you. Have another non-confidential report of 162, and this is the Rothamsted Park Pavilion project. We're asked to consider and agree whether the council wishes to continue with the current planned pavilion project, given the viability issues set out at 3.5 to 3.9, but also to consider the alternative approach and agree how we wish to proceed on each element. So has everyone had an opportunity to read this report? Because there are two sort of distinct stages, because there's the current planned pavilion project, which I'm sure Carl can tell us about, and the alternative approach and the different elements to that. And that's at 163 and 164, and then it goes on as well to 165 and 166, and there are some photographs as well, which may assist for those that don't know what a mini pavilion looks like, and a shed. So it sounds to me that we were good to go because we got planning permission, didn't we, for what we discussed at length. I remember our town council meeting some time ago where we thought we cracked it, because the residents representative came and then we sort of had a look at this, all the drawings, and basically just the financial position has moved on to the point where it looks like we wouldn't be able to make ends meet to be able to fund it. So you've looked at alternatives, which the council has asked to look at this evening. In a nutshell, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, that's correct, Madam Mayor. So the project's been on a bit of a journey since it first started. Probably when it first started, most of the councillors here probably weren't involved at that time. It had a significant spell of scoping challenges, let's say, where it took a while to get the final decision as to what we were going to do. Since then, we've kind of gone through the natural processes. We're now at a point where the viability of the project is very questionable from our perspective. Yes, from a financial perspective, but also from a usage. You know, our big concern is that we invest money in something that sits pretty much dormant most of the time and becomes a liability to the council in the context of all the other things that we're trying to achieve in terms of sports facilities and other assets in the future. So as opposed to kind of just pushing on, cracking on and delivering what the vision was, we see this as an important kind of stop-go moment for council just to consider, you know, is the current planned pavilion the way forward? If not, here's an alternative that will deliver some of the priorities to a good level, but will also do so in a way that makes it viable.
Yeah. Councillor Speary.
Would you mind, if possible, please, elaborating a little bit on the cost increase? Because to be fully transparent, my concern is that, firstly, if this is a case of it's advisory, for example, that's caused this to become the cost to scale out control by to the tune of around £100,000. What guarantee do we have sitting here when we approve an alternative that you don't have a similar spiral in terms of advisory fees? And if it's related to materials, which obviously have increased massively over the last period, are we not in a similar position? Are the costs incurred versus forecast? That isn't to me immediately clear from the number given, which would also make a difference to future projects. So if you could just, I obviously understand the point about the £250,000 funding, but if you could elaborate a little bit as to how we've ended up in this position, that would be helpful to making a subsequent decision.
Yes, Madam Mayor, of course. So if we take back to the start of this particular project, it was a project budget of £750,000, where at the time the town council set aside 500 grand, and we had a strong opportunity to get in just less than £250,000. At that point in time, the business case that we put forward, Madam Mayor, was heavily focused on a facility that was a bit bigger and that crucially had a commercial angle to it, so that it could bring in a revenue every year for the council that over a period of time would justify the upfront costs. So as the project was scoped and narrowed, let's say, the thing that we lost was the community hireable space. Now, a key part of that, Madam Mayor, was the pre-planning application advice, where we weren't told specifically that you wouldn't secure planning for something that had a large community hall, but we were told pretty clearly that it makes the justification for very special circumstances even harder. So that's one part of the answer, in the sense of when we set out on the journey, there was a revenue making opportunity here that's been almost removed. Then the issue is time, basically. So what was a £750,000 project at that point in time, largely as a result of material and labour costs, has now shot through the roof, for varying different reasons that I'm sure you'll kind of be aware of. So the costs have gone as a result of the changes out there in the environment, as opposed to any decision that the town council's made, other than the timing. So, the longer these things go on, the more they cost. So to give you a comparable example, not so long ago we had 30 grand set aside for a boardwalk project, to the extension of the boardwalk down Backley Springs. That's now over £100,000, exactly the same material and labour. Things have gone incredibly crazy. The advisory side of things, with a project like this, we set out at the start what our costs are going to be, our technical costs, and we kind of meet them, actually. So it's less on the advisory side. In order to give kind of future reassurance, Madam Mayor, we carry out a tender process. So effectively, which is what we went through, we put out a tender spec, contractors bid for the work, and if that's agreed, then that becomes the cost of the project. So often, until we get the tenders back, we're not quite sure how something's going to cost. Different types of projects you deal with in different ways. Some projects you set out in the tender spec, this is your budget. In this case, where we had a agreed and planning permission secured building, we go out to tender to build what's agreed. And then what's come back is prices that are well beyond what the original project were. So there's a number of different reasons. I'm not sure whether that answers it specifically, but it's largely the material and labour costs that have gone up.
May I follow up on that?
Yes, do.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very clear. What I'd like to know then is the £300,000 that is currently allotted that would not be spent on the new project. What is the plan to reallocate that? And what overhead/runoff room are you leaving for another period of instability and increasing costs, so that we don't end up back in a position here in another year, 2 years, where we're saying, this project is also not financially viable, let's move on to a third proposal.
Can we just roll back just a little bit, because I had a question in relation to your first one, if that was all right, because I think we've moved on just half a step. So the cost being closer to 180 versus 170, so that's another 100,000, which actually in the grand scheme of our budgets and the money that we have, this is at 3.6 on programme 163. I mean, I'm not saying £100,000 isn't a lot of money. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there are perhaps ways of finding £100,000. The external funding, I appreciate, is the big knock though, isn't it? The 250, that really brings us down a lot. And is there no way of exploring that again in order to find that 250,000 that you've referenced in 3.7?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, that opportunity isn't there for this particular project as planned.
Would it be available for a project that was planned before that had some hireable space?
Probably not, Madam Mayor.
No, okay.
No, so what it
So
would be,
is it time that's gone by that means that 250 isn't available, or is it something else?
yeah, I mean, that's external funding of a national funding provider whose
Yeah.
pipeline of projects fills up and the government tell them they're going
And so we've missed our window, that's been allocated to something else.
So we know it was never allocated to us.
Oh,
But the opportunity was there. The opportunity is gone because of the time
okay,
for this project as planned.
Yeah.
The reference to the new clubhouse project, we then do start getting in the realms of having access potentially to that sort of external funding again.
oh, okay, right.
Crucially,
Mhm.
because we can justify how that clubhouse project would be viable from a usage point of view. Whereas it's a difficult sell now to the likes of the Football Foundation to say how the pavilion that we secured planning permission for will be well used. It's an argument that isn't there anymore.
And it's as a result on 3.8 of the indication that was given in a pre-planning application that meant that we couldn't have the commercial space that we would need to run it and actually keep the lights on and pay for the cost of it being there, not just being empty, isn't it?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so the external funding isn't linked to that point you
No,
made
no,
there.
no.
That's the
No, I understand.
external
Yeah.
funding point is because the priorities change, or in the case of the Football Foundation or the government, they kind of tweak slightly. So the big tweak is around to multi-sports and community facilities that have wider use.
Mhm.
Whereas historically, the Football Foundation, and I could be slightly careful here because again we're in public.
Mhm.
Historically, and I don't want to ruin any negotiations
No,
by saying
no,
something.
no.
Historically, it's been football, so it
Yeah.
has to be, only fund football.
Yeah.
Whereas the government have shifted things. The last government shifted things. The current government have changed it, so they've had to pivot to that,
To what, sorry? To the pivot to?
to a facility that has wider community use and wider benefit,
Okay,
not a pavilion that will sit in the park empty most of the time.
yeah. Well, that's not what we're aiming for anyway, is it, really? So, so then my question on 3.8, does that give us any way forward to be able to perhaps re-persuade the planning people that we do need something that's slightly bigger with the commercial, the community space, like the multi-use? Or is the decision of this council that happened like over a year ago, is that sort of final and is not something that we could explore anymore?
I think what you've been asked this evening in the first instance is the current approach that you've agreed.
Yeah,
If council didn't like the alternative approach, you could go down the route that you've said there, but you're starting a project again.
yeah,
So you're starting with reserve, so the costs of 850 would probably be closer to 1 million because we've absorbed lots of costs already.
yeah. Okay.
And that's the issue with this sort of thing. When scoping gets slightly out of control, let's say, and takes too long, that's when you can get to this position. And it's slightly a perfect storm with the cost of things happening in this period. The original budget of 750 had some buffer that recognised that it was going to take a bit of time.
Okay. So the perfect option, as far as I was concerned, then that's gone probably and isn't going to be an option anymore. So then the one that we've got planning permission for, we can't afford anymore. So then we're looking at 2 mini sheds. I don't want to be facetious about it, but you've got a shed with glass and a shed without glass, and that's effectively it, isn't it? With no toilet, apart from one that's fenced off a quarterly around the back. And so then we come on to Councillor Speary's question, which is how quickly can we get on if we did decide to go down that route so that we're not going to be spending more than £300 on a shed with windows and a portally around the back and a shed without windows.
Yeah, so if you agree the alternative approach, that's built and costed to deliver this financial year within the timescales that we've sent out.
Right.
I think the important thing, Sam, just try and check where I've said it in this report.
Can you do that within the existing planning? Framework?
No, Madam Mayor, the alternative approach, we need to revisit our planning, but it's a whole different scale
Yeah.
of planning. And we do need to be careful in that in terms of how the terminology we use with the alternative approach, which we might come on to. But if we just take back to the original aims, because I appreciate it's a shed and I can't remember the first bit you described it as, but that's one part of the vision. The original idea of all this was to build something that served the AGP, the grass pitches for both cricket and football. So if you look at the alternative approach in isolation, I can see how you'd come to that sort of conclusion that it's not as maybe as ambitious. But deliberately, the other points that we made in this report around the new clubhouse for the 3G facility, that is a key part in delivering what we're saying here, to deliver that vision. You know, so that working that up, which is in the sports facility plan you've already agreed, deliver many of those original plans for probably no town council money. So this is now it's a package of facilities that deliver the aims, as opposed to one building, which was the original aspiration. That's the way that we're kind of looking at it as officers.
Yeah, go on. So just to observe, check my understanding and a question. So my understanding is we're going to create the same thing, we're just going to do it in different places, in different ways. So they still have the facilities to use for socially, but they have to go to the 3G area rather than the brand new pavilion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the benefits of this is the partnership with the existing Clubhouse Town FC, who have offered to use their facilities for the, things like refreshments and toilets.
Yeah.
Which is more than what we've got now.
Exactly.
So they'll be utilising existing clubhouse. If the grand vision is delivered, we could see a new clubhouse on another corner of the site, which would enable us to serve grass pitches, the AGP, and the existing clubhouse could become a new community hub for some other educational work, which is kind of the big picture stuff.
So question one is there a season, I don't know the answer to this, sorry, is there a season where football and cricket both play at the same time? So could there be like double the amount of people needing to use the same space in like 2 years' time when it's all done?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I mean, it's an overlap at the moment. So our partnership with the Common Cricket Club and Colts, they work very closely to, align fixtures. We have to take goalposts down at certain times and when we get into this time of the year. So there is an overlap, but the partnership approach enables that.
It's been managed already.
Yeah.
And then my second question is, have we spoken to Harpenden Common Cricket Club about what they would need, and would they be happy with this? In terms of does it satisfy their needs? The second.
No, so we haven't had any direct feedback from any cricket clubs on the alternative.
Have we asked them? We're waiting for them to come back.
We've asked one of the cricket clubs who have been involved in this from the start.
Okay.
But we've advised them that this is the plan and the feedback.
It seems to me that there's sort of two parts to this. So the first part is the existing buildings need to be demolished in all of the scenarios, and that's budgeted, and it's in the planning application, is my understanding. And is there not an argument to say that whatever happens, that needs to be got on and done with, and maybe look at the car park piece up at Orchard Avenue, which doesn't again affect what new bits are built. Those are sort of, if you like, set pieces.
There are footprint arguments, aren't there, in relation to those? So you don't demolish one without knowing what you're going to put. Replace it, because it's greenbelt, isn't it? Very simply, I think.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So I think the complication is the existing derelict pavilions, however crazy this might sound, enabled us to get planning permission for what we've got at the moment. So if we were to go with an alternative plan that is similar in scale to what we've already got approval, then demolishing the pavilions potentially could be a detrimental move by us, because we need them in order to secure planning, potentially. because as soon as you lose the pavilions, arguably in some areas they say, well, you haven't got a provision at the moment that you're replacing.
But I mean, again, speaking for myself, I don't see any scenario where it's the right thing to do to spend the best part of £1 million of the town council's money on a pavilion servicing those two clubs. I just don't see that when you've got all of the other sports clubs and everything else, which is you know, we have to cut our cloth, etc. So if as I see it, what's currently there is, unless people want to put significant money into it, it isn't an option. There isn't an option around it. And therefore, the question I would suspect is, do you just demolish the sites and leave as is and to put there two sheds, or do you or is it worth doing two sheds because that's helpful and a positive midway piece? I think it's between those two. There could be an argument to say, well, actually, it just doesn't work. It's not affordable, and therefore we should do the demolishing works, increase the car park, and move on. Yeah, that's sort of alternatively.
Councillor Sprue.
I'm sorry to come back to this point. I just really want to drill into it because this strikes me as a much less ambitious plan than the previous one. And I'm very concerned that with reducing from the planned, I'm trying to remember the words used is the existing £500,000 allocated to the planned pavilion, reducing that down to £200,000, potentially then delivering something which seems to be far less ambitious a project, which, if I'm honest, I don't think does meet the criteria as set out previously. Because to me, this seems as though we're building the town an additional clubhouse, which other clubs don't seem to have use of, and social groups don't seem to have use of, with no prospect or understanding really of why costs have overrun. And then also no sense that that money won't, the remaining portion of the money won't be reallocated elsewhere. So we're then back here saying, well, now we only have £200,000. This project's overrun. Are we just going to build one shed? You know, where I'm just trying to get a sense of why this will work and the previous one didn't. And I think if I got that, I'd be able to sit here and go, let's go for it. But I'm struggling because I'm struggling with that element. And I'm completely there with the element of we had to reduce the social space. I'm completely there with the element of funding, just not there with the element of the overrun costs because I just don't understand that point. You know, you mentioned that the costs were absorbed, but then previously you said it was due to a planned increase in the cost of materials, which means the costs aren't absorbed. And I'm really struggling from your answers to ascertain why. So if I appreciate we've been over this, but if you could really be clear.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, let me be clear. So there was a project budget of £750,000.
Yeah.
We secured planning permission for a build.
Yeah.
We went out to tender for that specific build, and the cost came back in at £850,000. Right. So the contractor's telling us we can't deliver that for £750,000.
So
my reasons why I think that is the case is because it's taken so long to get to tender stage.
So what assumptions were made that led to £750,000, and how have they been adjusted in coming to £200,000 here?
I'm not sure about the £200,000 because that's a different approach. That relates to a different approach. So the £750,000 project budget, Madam Mayor, was at the point of time that this was initiated where we thought we would probably deliver it within 18 months.
Right.
But we are now probably almost 5 years down the line.
Gotcha.
So the original project costs were relative to the timescale of the project.
Okay.
So because the timescale's been extended, the costs have gone up because things have changed out there.
And what's the timescale forecast for the new project?
For the alternative as set out
Alternative
here,
set out.
You said 18 months, I think.
18.
no, so if you approve the things that are in the image, so they'll be delivered probably within the next 6 months. So they will be in place for the next cricket season, which is the important thing. The other parts of the work, which is the options to do some things with the new clubhouse or a new clubhouse, plans for that would come forward in September, autumn time. That's a completely new project and separate to this. So that will have its own business case where we'll be able to set out how that will be funded. The £300,000 that would be the surplus, let's say, if you take the alternative approach, that is then up to council to decide how that's reallocated. That doesn't just disappear somewhere. You then may look at that and go, okay, well, we really like this new clubhouse project in September and we're going to allocate X amount to it. Or you may say we're going to give Harpen and Rovers Youth 50 grand to do the pavilion, but that's the gift to the council. So that's the key reason. At the point at which of initiating this many moons ago, the project costs were realistic to the timescale that we were going to deliver it. Timescale's extended, and now it's not viable from a cost point.
And you're confident that this timescale is realistic?
It depends what we approve, isn't it?
Yeah, for the alternative here, which is the two initial buildings, that's a case of securing planning permission, which will be fairly straightforward, and then purchasing them and putting them on site. Because they don't have huge utility demands and things like that. It's not a large scale project.
Yep.
It's a very small installation.
Madam Mayor, the alternative approach is 2 cricket facilities. Have the cricket club, will they be able to make a contribution to this? Or have they been approached already, since they'll be getting exclusive use?
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, I think it's been made clear in the past when we've asked that question throughout this process that there wouldn't be any funding coming forward from them. And that's the same with the Colts, part of the original vision for this.
Yeah, my experience with other clubs is that when they need a facility, that they put a house out, they raise money, they look for fundraising opportunities, and usually they're very successful as well. Why not in this instance?
So I think, Madam Mayor, the key difference, you're right, but the key difference is this isn't their facility. So if this was the Common Cricket Club, we were talking about their site, we would say, well, that's your responsibility to draw down the funds that you need for your vision. And that's indeed actually what we've done. The difference here is this is a town council park that we've got 2 derelict pavilions on, that the commitment has been to replace them, basically.
Right, so there's no home team that plays on.
No, I mean we've got a key partnership with the Common Cricket Club, which is all around improving grass pitch facilities, in particular for females and young girls. That's been really successful. That's been in place for 3 or 4 years now, despite not having the ancillary facilities.
Yeah.
We also have Harpen and Dolphins, who used to play regularly on the pitches up there, but moved away for some time because there wasn't of a certain standard. So the two cricket pitches up there were both dangerous for many years. The town council, when we took them on from the district, we invested some time and money in the partnership to put them right. There are other teams that play there. There are dads' social teams from local schools. There are other teams from neighbouring villages in Luton that hire it out at different times. But this isn't a kind of a sole use club facility in the same way that the Common Cricket Club is. But you're correct ordinarily in that scenario. You'd say to them, go and raise the funds for it.
Councillor Scott.
I have just an observation and a question, and I'm just my observation is recalling back to the previous occasions where we discussed this at a previous council. For me, it did feel on the borderline based on cost in terms of it was a substantial project then, and there was a debate, and I ended up on voting for to go ahead with the project at the time. But I think to me it's now crossed the threshold at which I think the opportunity cost is far too high, and the investment funds are best deployed elsewhere. That would just be my observation. But my question is just, Madam Mayor, for the town clerk, his observations on how much the campaigning efforts of the Almondbury Lane residents contributed to the delays in the achievement of the planning approval and the project as a whole.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so you probably won't be surprised to say I'm not going to comment specifically on that, but all I would say in major projects like this, particularly in parks, it's not unusual for stakeholder engagement to slow things down. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So my view, for what it's worth, is that it's now being scaled back to the point where you have a facility that doesn't provide the right facilities for, as you just tried to explain, for girls to use that facility in the same way that boys would use the facility. So I think it's actually, for females, almost completely hopeless, because a portaloo round the back of a shed with some fencing round it would not encourage, in my view, teenage girls to readily go and use a cricket or football facility, and to send them off down a track to go and use a football clubhouse where you don't know. I mean, I would end up going with my children to the toilet. You walking down the track, past a whole, you know, the entire length of the football field pitch. And then you go into another building, you don't know whether there's a load, you know, the dad's team in there or whoever's going to be in there. You don't know what the toilet facilities are going to be like. You don't know whether they're going to be clean, dirty or otherwise. And I just think it's just completely hopeless. I don't think it actually meets the appropriate standards for people's kids, male or female for that matter, in Harpenden to use as a nice facility. You know, I appreciate that it's handy for another 3G facility for boys to go, and boys can obviously go and play in the bushes if that's what they want to do. But I don't think girls would be as willing to use the pitches and the park in the same way. And I feel that we're letting people down if we go for an option where there's not a suitable plumbed in toilet with running water so that they can wash their hands after doing what they need to do. That's only my opinion. And I just feel that we're missing an opportunity if we don't have a toilet in one of our sheds.
Yes.
If it has
Well,
to be a shed.
But the question is that actually feasible, or is it not feasible to put a proper toilet in there?
The challenge we've got, Madam Mayor, is as soon as you start adding toilets in, it starts becoming, I was explaining to this over email, it starts to become a small clubhouse or hub.
Yeah.
As soon as it starts to become a small clubhouse or hub, we are triggering the minimum requirements from Sport England for a small clubhouse and hub. So it's not just putting a toilet in. And that's where we got to last time. So almost...
I can't see Sport England saying our guidance means that you either have a shed without a toilet in it and a portaloo around the back, or you have nothing. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, but it's just so infuriating that Sport England guidance would prevent a plumbed-in toilet and hand washing facility at a sports facility where we're trying to encourage female cricketers and footballers to use it. I mean, it just totally blows my mind.
Can I ask a question?
Can I just come back on
Sorry,
that?
yeah.
I just want to be clear as to what's my view and what is
No,
the statutory consultee,
Yeah.
what they would say on it.
Mm.
You know, that it may well be crazy. The planning framework in this country is, in my view, crazy in lots of ways. This is one of them. So the planning permission we've secured at the moment is pretty much of the minimum size to deliver the requirements. So as soon
Got
as
the minimum size, we can't afford all the sheds, and there's nothing in between. Is that right?
so this is where this option gets creative, and I completely understand your point about females and girls. You know, I'm a chair of a youth football club with loads of girls. I get that. I would say that in the last 18 months, we've seen a massive increase in female participation, girls in grassroots football, in the park, and on the AGP, and in the local cricket teams, all the while we haven't had a toilet facility in the park. So what we're proposing here is to deliver what we've already got, but also give access to an existing clubhouse building that is down the access way, which provides more facilities than has been available in the last 18 months when the usage and the demand has been met by some of our partners. So I completely agree with you, the idea of it in the sense of young girls in particular, but things have been successful for a period of time, you know, despite not having facilities.
Good.
Yeah.
Sorry, two things. When you say toilets round the back, that just freaks me out a little bit. Is there a way when we put them in that they are not like round the back, which is just risky for girls to go to? So if they were more visible, like next to, rather than hidden around the back, I think is really important. The other thing is I'm really struggling to imagine where it is in relation to that pathway. And I'm wondering, when we remove the other two, is there any way that there can be a better well-lit path that goes to the potential new football facilities in time? Would be a better walking experience. I can't imagine where it is, so I've got no idea if I'm just, you know, throwing something, but something that would be a bit better for people to run up and down.
Yeah, so that would be the access way. So that'd be a case of resurfacing that and putting lighting along there.
How much would that cost, I think?
Oh, I don't know.
So we know.
We're in a
that-
we're in a scoping world again there.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm just thinking of it addressing some of the concerns, the practical concerns we have for the girls. 'Cause I know they're using it now, but I guess the parents are running or they go to the sports centre,
Yeah.
the leisure centre, which
I mean, you've
is,
got 10 minutes out of a match or training to go to the loo. It just seems we've got an opportunity there to put a loo in. Potentially there will be arguments and it might delay it again just slightly, but it just seems like we're missing a golden opportunity and trying to persuade the right people to see common sense. Anyway, sorry, go on, Mr. Council.
Actually, on that point, my concern is the point you made about planning and needing the pavilions there to enable that first instance of planning is because you're restoring something rather than building something from the ground up. My concern is that you put these in, you spend the money putting them in. We know to a certain extent, sitting here, if we're honest, that this isn't really what we wanted or isn't really sufficient, but it's kind of like a best circumstance at the moment. But then down the line, because we've spent this money on what is relatively a new facility, we're almost then, we've created an additional cost to doing something about it later on. So it almost feels like we're going slightly down the wrong path, because if you then want to replace this shed, you've kind of got to take it out, having already spent that money. And so it seems to me that this is almost like a crossroads point where if you go down this route, you kind of can't reverse course very easily and say, right, we now do actually think that the original idea, which was putting something more substantial with social space in, is a good idea. Do you see what I mean? And to a certain extent also, I mean, if we look across Harpenden, I'm not convinced that our pavilion facilities are necessarily up to scratch. I mean, obviously we've been talking a little bit about the old Rovers pavilion, Northampton pavilion, etc. I'm concerned maybe that this is continuing down the same path where we end up with facilities that get worn into disrepair. You know, wooden sheds with glass windows on the front that are for all intents and purposes sheds. You know, windows get smashed, they become very dirty on the inside, people abandon things in them. So, you know, how long before, part of my worry is how long before we have more decrepit assets that we need to deal with, and then we've wasted some of this money that could have gone towards a stronger project.
Madam Mayor, can I just make one point, just so everybody is aware as to what we're doing here, in the sense of the council has set officers a priority in the business plan. We aren't delivering our project. We're setting you options as to how you can deliver your priorities. So some of the language about if you do this, if you do that, it's a council decision. So we are trying to enable you to take the decision that gets the vision that you want. The issue is perhaps the vision is more complicated than we thought it might be. It's really important that this isn't our project or Dan's project. This is us giving ways forward to deliver your business plan. And that's really important. I know it's a difficult decision, but I think you maybe need to start to come to the point about debating between yourselves as to where you want to go, as opposed to scrutiny of an alternative. And it is only one alternative. You could ask us to scope alternatives, and that's fine, but it's yours. But this is how you deliver your priority.
Okay. Councillor Scott, I think you were next.
Madam Mayor, and I totally get the way you sort of articulated the suboptimal, if I can put it that way, sort of experience for children, particularly young girls. You know, can I just ask literally some hygiene questions? And apologies, Town Clerk, coming back to you again, just so that we've got all the information that we need. Are we talking about a single unit or more than one? And crucially, like, how often would it be cleaned?
So, Madam, are you talking about the Portaloo?
Yes, that's right. So we're talking 1 unit or 2 units. So obviously, if you've got one, you might have a queue, particularly at half time or whatever it is. And then obviously cleaning and hygiene is pretty critical. So I'm just wondering whether that's every day or a different frequency.
Yeah, so I think I'd have to check what the specifics of the current one are, but in many ways that's kind of in council's gift as well.
Yeah.
To set a requirement of it. I mean, the slight what was I going to say, perhaps a paradox in this is that I mentioned Sport England guidance, which you have to deliver certain things to deliver one of these, but from a football association point of view, there is no requirement for a youth football club to have a toilet adjacent to grass pitches. So that in itself is one of the crazinesses of all this. You've got a statutory consultancy who requires you to deliver certain things, and then you've got the national governing body that doesn't require you to have it. So, you know, that, and things have changed over the years. So if you look at other pavilions, they were built at the point at which they had the current guidelines, whatever they were here then. guidelines with the Equalities Act, with the Accessibility Act, have changed dramatically. And so the expectations have gone up. So I know that's a point you've made. You know, we've got other facilities in the town that don't have these things. That's because they were built at a point in time where they delivered that guidance.
And you'd need planning permission as well, don't you, for a portaloo that's going to be there for more than a month? Apparently.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, there are ways in which you can have those sort of temporary structures within the planning framework.
Councillor Ray had a question.
So I guess sort of coming back to my previous point, which is there's £1 million. I don't think there's £1 million there. Truly, where our choice comes to is there's some sort of intermediate piece, of which certainly my experience around construction projects, the quicker you can deliver them, the simpler it is, the less construction price inflation you're likely to have. Or your only other choice, which seems like a slightly mad one, is the other choice is just to demolish and have nothing. And which obviously it has the savings, don't do anything else other than demolish the existing. Or the last one doesn't seem to work, which is you basically carry on as is today. Because nothing's going to get cheaper in the next 12, 24 months. It'll get more expensive. Construction price inflation is probably running at 15%.
So I think my question is, would the public appreciate us discussing whether there's a mini pavilion that costs, let's just say, plucking a figure out of the air and taking 50 grand off for the posh shed, but the shed with windows for 150 grand, would we like a mini pavilion or would we like a nice toilet block which actually serves more people in using facilities, and then if they want a posh mini pavilion they can use the 3G clubhousey bit, because you don't nip there at half time, do you go there after to have your teas and stuff. So why are we this is a question for everybody, I'm just asking, why do we think we need a mini pavilion as opposed to plumbed in toilets and then storage facilities and a board?
My understanding is the reason is you can't build just a toilet block because you wouldn't get that through planning, because to get the planning you need to have a pavilion.
Yeah, that's what I understand. They came up with the minimum.
Yeah.
So it's the minimum or nothing, and the minimum costs £1 million effectively. Is that where we're at? I think that's where.
Call it a toilet pavilion then, and not have any. You don't need changing rooms or anything. You don't
think we're allowed to do that.
You just need plumbed in toilets with hand washing facility.
We're not. I don't think we're allowed to.
Yeah, so I mean, with Madam Mayor, I couldn't with confidence give you an answer as to whether planning would allow that. That would be very different to what we've talked about in the past. You know, it's an alternative to the alternative. You know, a toilet facility only. It's not something we've scoped before, and so I couldn't give you
So effectively building public loos in that corner of the park.
Effectively, yes.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, because then they could be open for people who are playing cricket, football.
There'll be public loos, so they'll be open to everybody. Just the same way the ones are just outside Pizza Express, and something like that.
So would they therefore be, under the auspices of Sport England? If it's a
No, they would be just public loos.
yeah, exactly.
But that's if there's going to be a new clubhouse at the 3G facility, then you don't need a clubhouse in the park, do you?
Sorry, can I ask what was in the original business plan as to what we wanted before my time? But what was the criteria?
So really, I'm just thinking the exact words from head, but it was along the lines of to replace the existing pavilions with Rockhampton Park with a facility that served the grass pitches and had wider community use.
Yeah.
The wider community use was the ability to have dance classes, dance schools, yoga and all that sorts of things. So, and part of the driver for that is because Park Hall downstairs, at that time, we could sell that 2 or 3 times over. The demand for it was huge.
That's still the case as well, I think.
Yeah, probably not 3 times over, but the demand is huge. So that was the original. The community use angle was the key bit.
Yeah.
And then that's when partly the stakeholder engagement on that, probably we lost that element of it, the wider community use.
Yeah.
So then it just became something serving the grass pitches. Yeah, you could have some chair-based exercise in there once a week, but that's £15 an hour income. It's not it's not a commercial opportunity.
So
So
maybe
for
we
the
need to
cricketers
rethink
and the
it.
footballers
Yeah.
amongst us, what would you actually do in a glass fronted shed?
Sorry?
What would one do in a glass
I think
fronted?
it's storage kits.
The storage is here.
Well, I think that storage is more for the, floorboard, isn't it? And
I think it's things, isn't it, like people turn up to do, it's raining, so
training, the shelter,
they put their bags and stuff in there to,
Sandwiches?
sitting there on sandwich.
Yeah, and the cricket teams generally have a sort of a base on the facility that they sit outside of. They might take refreshments. It's kind of it has many forms. There's lots of those examples popped around the country in different village greens and things like that. But as you suggest, Madam Mayor, that is one alternative we tried to bring to the table. If that's not the right way forward and you want to look at an alternative, which is essentially, it would be a project to build public toilets within Northampton Park to serve the users, and that's a different project. And we start again, but it's a
Because that would be everybody if it uses Northampton Park.
But that then makes it no different to going down to the football pavilion. If anyone can use it, you don't know who's going to be in there anyway, do you? So it just-
Yeah. Yes.
No, it's just more convenient, isn't it?
It's just more convenient.
Yeah.
currently your estimate
Right, okay.
of this solution alternative for pavilion and shed is 50 grand.
pretty much.
So, so the majority of the cost that's actually in the alternative is the demolition costs.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, which as we've mentioned, that's going to have to be borne at some point anyway.
Exactly. So to some degree, the decision is whether to spend the 50k on those two buildings or not. And probably doesn't stop while of looking at whether there's an alternative to the two buildings, which includes public toilet block as well alongside.
So is there a difference between an upfront cost and the actual total cost? Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, upfront cost is where we're kind of purchasing assets or building something.
Yeah.
The total cost will include kind of ongoing expenditure. Yeah, so the alternative in this report is kind of low maintenance, I would call it. I don't know,
Yeah.
a toilet facility, which has lots of merits, I think, actually, in lots of ways, but the ongoing costs would be very significant. That's why you'd have to, if that is a priority, we'd have to bring back the scopes
Yeah.
options to the next meeting to see where you went. In the meantime, if that was the route that you were going to go down and you didn't like this alternative, then I probably would encourage you to agree to the demolition of the existing pavilions tonight so that we can get on with that. If you're not going to replace them with something similar to the existing planning permission, at least then we can get on with that and we get good costs of that.
Which I think is the important thing on the basis of if you're not going to do the £1 million building the big thing out, do the demolition, that cost is going to stop rising.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but even if you put a small pavilion on there, you've then got something that you can, if you want to then in 5 years' time, you get 1.5 million probably by that point, a nice big donation by, I don't know, an ex-cricketer, famous cricketer, want to invest in it. At least you've got something on the site to upgrade rather than nothing at all.
No, totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's sort of two different decisions.
There is, yeah.
There's one, I think, which is simplistically, I think, is a relatively easy decision, because unless you think there's £1 million to spend, there's another decision, which is do you build the 50 grand pavilion or not, or do you do some
I
variation?
think what Carl was saying is that if we don't, then later on we won't be able to come back. That's what Councillor was saying. We need to have that. We need to have those pavilions, don't we? Because otherwise,
Well, you only need to have those two pavilions if you're building something of that size. If the decision is you're not building something of that size,
but it gives our options open. That's all.
Yeah.
In the future.
It kept the options.
So we can build something, but if we demolish it and leave it, we can't.
That's true, but there's a cost. Those two buildings are eyesores, and they're just a town embarrassment, both of them. Why would you still have two condemned buildings lurking in our?
and
So
that,
if we get rid of those,
Get rid of them. Yeah,
And then-
personally,
but if we have
We
nothing,
shouldn't get rid of them, but I think it's the timing. So if we all just unanimously decided, as we probably would, to demolish those buildings, but not replace them with anything, then we are setting the next future councils up for a much more difficult planning
Yes,
application.
yes.
Because you're not replacing it.
So there's an assumption there that the national planning framework remains unchanged.
I think at the moment it
Can't
might
gamble
be,
it.
so it's
Yeah.
probably a good idea to have something there, because that's pretty basic planning.
But I think the cost of having two decrepit, dangerous, asbestos-ridden buildings, you know, causing a blight on Rothamsted Park, I think there is a cost to that.
Well, also, I wouldn't underestimate that demolition cost could go up.
Yeah.
Because if the rules change around how you dispose of the asbestos, for example, or those buildings, that a lot of that cost will be for the landfill of taking material from there, disposing of it correctly. And that you could wait 12 months, you could find that 100,000 to 200,000 easily. This is an area where the legislation becomes tougher every time.
And so just to bring this potentially to conclusion, I'm in terms of breaking these proposals down into steps. I've made my opinion very clear about the buildings that are blight on the park, dangerous. The cost of demolishing and removing them is only going to go up. I think there's the potential to increase the car parking space on the Orchard Lane site. My personal view is we do that now and instruct the officer team to go ahead and do that. And we potentially consider some other options in parallel to that for the site. We are not going to have the budget or the planning permission ever for a large pavilion, which I personally would have liked, but I think our friends at Armandry Lane have waged a very successful campaign to frustrate that. So kudos to them. And I think we're going to have to be very modest and practical in our expectations for future facilities. But I think we should just get on with it, take those buildings out and extend the car park on Orchard Lane.
Can I add an alternative into that? So I'm not saying we shouldn't put that combination of things to a vote, but can I add one option, which is to develop the car park, to demolish the existing buildings, but to also, well, actually you might need two alternatives. So the first one is to go ahead with the mini pavilion and storage with a cost estimate of, we could say in the region of £50,000, with a view to also further scoping better toilet facilities. And the other one without that last bit that I've just added in. And we could have a vote on those three options.
So that would be the sheds and then public loos is what you're looking at.
So two sheds with scoping public toilets.
We know we can't get that because we know that they've looked, what we were offered was the minimal. So therefore it won't just be, it will either be public loos or what we can't do because we can't afford it.
Well, no, because the building that the loos were inside that pavilion. So we had that lovely glossy, do you remember the lovely
Yeah, and
pictures with the loos inside? What
That's
I'm
what we
saying
can't
is there's a
afford.
separate toilet block, which wouldn't be your big glossy pavilion. It would just be a plumbed in, proper draining toilets
Yeah,
with hand
which are
washing
just-
facilities.
Which are effectively public toilets.
Yeah.
That's what I'm,
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
Not
saying,
in a
two
big
sheds,
Shiny pavilion.
yeah, so two sheds and public loos.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, an option to investigate the possibility of, yeah.
Yeah, we have no idea
No,
if planning permission could be available for the toilet block in Rothamsted Park. And I think it's also fair to say there are many other groups, for example, my fellow grannies would love to see a toilet block near the children's play area. I've had my ears chewed off by many grannies on that point. So I'm really doubtful about the toilet block idea, but personally I would vote for the officer's recommendations.
I just want to share some of my concerns. So I'm not happy to spend money on building something because of the limitation and end up with all not happy about it. But at the same time, if we just do the demolition, we will lose the option to leverage on the planning in the future. is there method that we keep the thing existing, but make it less eyesore?
No, because it's got asbestos in it.
So can we just? I'm just crazy thinking. Can we just box it up and then?
That's what we have been doing. It's got fencing around it.
I think that if we do the demolition, which I'm more closer to support that, but at the same time that the concern will be losing the option for the future council to do anything on it, and then and that makes me thinking whether I have to make that decision for the future. So that's why I'm thinking how to like keep the current status, keep our option open, but at the same time make it less eyesore or make it like existing, so that we don't have to even spend any money.
Less of an eyesore over the last 5 years, we would have done that, wouldn't we? I mean, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure we've explored ways and means of actually either making it safe or making it look more attractive, but
Yeah, Madam Mayor, our focus has been on making it safe and secure from a health and safety perspective. And we haven't considered fencing it in and the expense around that, which in itself would be quite costly. That the focus has been on securing it as a health and safety risk.
yeah. Any other views or alternatives?
I think it would be ludicrous to knock it down and not replace it. So I think we're left in a position whereby this proposal is the only viable alternative. Because to knock it down and not put something there would be a loss of option value, a loss of not just a loss of a potential facility. And to be honest, I don't think we could justify it.
And view on car park, increasing the car park?
Well, that's a separate issue, isn't it?
So we've got a number of alternatives then. I think we probably have to go to a vote, don't we? Otherwise we could have gone up for an extremely long time. So who would vote simply for the very basic option of just demolishing the two sheds in the two pavilions in isolation? Okay, no one for that.
So is that combined with the car park extension and Orchard Road?
No, that was the one. That was just one. And building to it. And then there's the demolition with an extension of a car park. Just that. Okay. And then the demolition of the two pavilions. I'm going to say with a car park as well. And then replacing one of the pavilions with a mini pavilion and a storage facility and a scoreboard. Squeeze it out as well, a scoreboard.
Waterloo?
It's there already.
The Portaloo's there already.
Okay.
With a Portaloo fenced off round the back. And would anyone also add in the option of scoping a public toilet block to see whether that may or may not be viable for the purposes of improving the facilities?
There's no harm in
Scoping
exploring
it,
it.
isn't it?
Can't see any harm in.
Just learn it.
We've just been
Nothing else.
over it.
Can't see any harm in.
Madam Mayor, sorry, have we accidentally excluded the consideration of the new 3G facility with Hartland Town in that discussion, which was, as I understood it, a subsequent step after this?
I don't think we've got 3 point,
4.10, 4.11 and 5.6.
3.9.
That's a separate.
That's not our decision. We're not the.
Yeah, so I think that's us actually, because that's 4.10. So our considerations were 3.5 to 3.9. Sorry.
So, Madam Mayor, just to clarify on your voting as you move towards a resolution. So, page 162, 2.1.1 is the first thing you probably need to do.
And agree whether it should continue with the current plan. So we didn't want to do that, did we?
You haven't taken a vote on that.
Oh, can we vote on that? Sorry. What's that? Whether we want to continue with the current planned pavilion project. The big shiny 850 grand one. Sorry, that's my.
We have to yay or nay.
So can we agree that we do not want to, is that what you want me to do? we don't want to continue with the current project.
That's the recommendation. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Okay. So, Madam Mayor, having done that, now that
Yeah.
unlocks the point around the 3G club facility, because naturally now we will work with partners to scope that further. And we can't do that if you were to go down the other route, because we'd never get planning permission for it. We've already got planning for it. Okay, so that's your first bit, your sequence. And so then, Madam Mayor, I think you've now got to the place where you've got a recommendation to demolish both of the existing pavilions, extend the car park at Orchard Avenue Pavilion as set out in the report, and scope a toilet block facility on site. Although, you know, that third one, a separate piece of work, is to bring that back in
Two
September.
sheds and a couple of roofs.
Yeah, and to deliver the alternative approach that's set out in the paper. So I think that's what the vote is.
And the 3G facility to councillor Spirit's point as well.
Yeah, so that will come forward in September as well. Detailed plans for that.
Great.
Shall I say that one more time, just to be absolutely clear?
No,
So you've been asked, you haven't voted yet. We took a random show of hands, different councillors voted for multiple, couple of things. And so you need a resolution. So you're taking a resolution to change your previous decision, council's previous decision. So now you're being asked to vote in favour of the demolition of the existing pavilions, the delivery of the alternative as set out in the report, the scoping of a toilet block that will come back in September with whether it's viable or not, and also further details in September around alternative clubhouse projects on the 3G pitch.
Yes.
So you vote in favour of that, I believe. Thank you.
We got them, yeah.
All right, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Sorry, Carl. Right. Sorry, can't go yet. Oh, right. So I'm now going to read out and ask you all to resolve that in view of the confidential nature of the following items, which relate to the business matters or other individuals and organisations, the public and accredited representatives of the press should be excluded while they are discussed. This is in accordance with the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960 as amended by the Local Government Act 1972. So we've got item 9.1.
Madam Mayor, is everybody happy to resolve to move into exempt business? Yeah. Thank you.